Purposely. Your life, God's purpose. Listen at purposely.com.
The Bible says, take your thoughts captive. That's what's going to propel us in a different direction. And that's why it's so important, not that we can live with rose-colored glasses, but to recognize, how is thinking that negatively affecting me? Because how we think drives our emotions, and our emotions are going to drive our actions, and our actions are how determine how we live our life.
Have you ever experienced what you might think of as a lifequake? I really like this phrase, and my friend Tracie Miles is on the show today. You're listening to the AllMomDoes podcast. I'm Julie Lyles Carr, your host. Tracie is such an accomplished writer and speaker. She has been doing some amazing things in her career, and in the middle of all of it, she experienced quite a lifequake. We're going to talk about that today and what to do when a lifequake comes for you. Tracie, thanks so much for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
So give the listener a snapshot of where you are in the world, what you do. I know that some of my listeners who are aspiring writers are going to know exactly who you are, but fill us in.
Great. Well, I am a published author. I have my 8th book coming out called God's Got You, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes. It's coming out July 2nd. I'm also an author coach. I have Tracie Miles author coaching at traciemiles.com, and I just am passionate about helping other aspiring writers reach their dreams. And I also am the director of COMPEL training at Proverbs31 Ministries, and that's where we train thousands of writers every month on just the industry of writing and publishing and reaching their own publishing goals.
I love that. Well, and for my writer friends out there, now you know somebody great to go talk to about all of that you might have in your heart that you're wanting to get down onto the page. So in this new book, you and I both know as authors that anytime you have a topic come up that you're going to start writing on something, there is that planning that goes on. There is that, is anybody needing this message? Is this just for me? Is it for other people? How did you come into a place of wanting to write about God's got you, embracing new beginnings with courage and confidence? How did that genesis begin of this book?
Well, it's kind of been a long journey, but the last number of books I've written, because this is hard to believe, but it's been almost 9 years since my husband and I separated. We were married for 25 years. And since that time, somehow God has given me all this content for all these different books. And they've been about changing your mindset and your perspective about life. That was Unsinkable Faith. And then learning to love your life again. And the name of that book was Love Life Again. And then I wrote specifically for divorced women because I just had seen how God had helped me through that journey. And so I wrote a book and a Bible study called Living Unbroken, which is specifically to help women, that have been going through separation and divorce or the end of any relationship. And so all of those books kind of led me to this point of, okay, we can, once you heal your heart and you realize God's goodness and you realize, okay, I can make it. And, no matter what you go through, it doesn't have to be divorce. It could be any like lifequake, like you're saying, which is just anything that happens in your life that kind of turns your life upside down or leaves you in a place or a season where you wonder, what's next for me? How am I going to live this next chapter? What am I going to do? Who do I want to be? And that's really how this book came about. It's more of it helps people have a blueprint, like a get up and go. It's time. You can do this. Decide who you want to be, reshape your life, reinvent yourself. And so that's just the place that I was when I started writing this. And I think it's going to be really encouraging for a lot of people.
I love that you bring up in this idea of lifequake. Sometimes, Tracie, I think that we think of having to start over or a fresh spot being something really, really dramatic. And at the same time, I've been having some moms write to me lately saying, man, I'm struggling with that kid heading off to college, or I'm not quite sure. I've loved the baby stage, and now these babies are moving into toddlerhood. They don't need me in quite the same way. Or I've been home with kids, and now I'm going back to work. Or we've made the choice for me to leave the job and to come home to the kids. These are still significant lifequakes, right? Where we have to start over into a fresh season.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I've been through so many, and that's why I can relate to everything that you said. I have three kids. They're all in their 20s. One just turned 30, unbelievably. Two got married a couple years ago. And then, I went through a divorce, like I said, a while back. And then I had to re-enter the workforce, like you just mentioned. And I went through the whole empty nest. Okay, everyone's at college now, and what am I supposed to do? And also I was alone with my empty nest, as a single person, and just learning to be a single person. And I sold my home a couple years ago that I'd lived in for 25 years. So that was another little life quake. It doesn't seem big to some people, but it was big. And just all the different seasons and even milestone birthdays. I've had a couple more of those than I'd like to have. So everything that happens, we can consider a life quake. It could be something good or it could be something traumatic, but in any case, we still have to figure out, okay, what's next? We can stay stuck and paralyzed in, why did God let me be here? Or what am I supposed to do? Or now life is over because this change has happened. Or we can shift our perspective and start thinking, okay, I'm not necessarily having to start over. I'm just beginning again. And that's a term that God really laid upon my heart in the writing of this book, is that, like, when we start over on something, it means, okay, you're starting from the bottom. Like, you've got to start over from the bottom up. But beginning again just means I'm taking everything I've learned through all these experiences, through my lifetime. I mean, we're not coming into beginning again with no wisdom in our head, or no experiences, notches on our belt. So beginning again, I think, gives it a new, fresh visual for us. Instead of saying, oh gosh, I have to start over again. It's like, no, we get to begin again in this place that God has us right now. And it's up to us to figure out how we're going to embrace moving forward in that new chapter.
That phrase, beginning again, wow, it's a great one, Tracie. It really speaks hope. It doesn't feel like you hit rock bottom and now you're trying to climb out. Mm-hmm. It reminds me of a conversation I recently had with author and pastor Randy Frazee. He was talking about this notion that we can have this crystallized wisdom. When we've had some life experience, maybe we're not up on all the trends, or we may not be able to conjure as many fresh ideas in our lives, but when we've walked through some stuff, you're right. We're starting from a place of some crystallized wisdom. We know the second time around, the third time around, the fourth time around, a little bit more than we knew the first time around, in a way that's going to really help us and create that begin again. I just love that phrase. That's fantastic. I think a lot of us, when we've been through something tough or good, it's just we're entering a new season, we can begin to feel stuck. I know for myself, I can sometimes feel stuck because I'm looking back and wishing things were the way they were, or I can get kind of paralyzed because I can't really visualize what the future is going to look like. So if someone's feeling stuck, they've come through a life quake, now this is their new, they're feeling stuck, what's the first step that you take to be able to move forward in some kind of way?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the very first step is just that mindset shift, because it's super easy. I've been there myself. And that's why in writing the book, Unsinkable Faith, I was walking out this journey of trying not to be a negative, woe is me, life is over type of person, because of all the things that had happened and the changes that I'd been just kind of tossed into. And everything in my life was just like shattered. And it was really a difficult season. So I think that step number one is just learning to almost force yourself, retrain your brain to shift how you think about things. It's always easy to say, oh, of course this is going to happen because I always have the worst luck. Or we could choose not to think that way, and we can choose to think the best. And then the second thing would probably be just to accept that this is where we are. There's this old phrase, I refer to it a lot, that my mom used to always tell me, and it would be, see if I can get it right, accept the things you cannot change the things that you can, and have the wisdom to know the difference. Mm-hmm. So there are circumstances that we can't change. We can't change what has happened. We can't change a season that we may be in, but we can accept, okay, this is now my reality. And so what am I going to do with that reality? And so being positive about it And then embracing the opportunity to begin again in your new reality is what's going to help you make the best of the time that we have left. We only get one life to live. So no one wants to be paralyzed in a bad feeling or a negative place, like you said. So we have the choice of how we want to move forward or if we want to stay stuck.
Give me the lay of the road, right? So change has come. I've accepted that this is the change. I'm working on my mindset. But there are some places where we can stumble. There are places where we can feel really blocked as we are progressing in this way. What are some things to be on the alert for when it comes to traversing that road of change and walking into new season?
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a lot of stumbling blocks that are just a part of reality. I mean, we're going to face them. There's going to be challenges. So it really, everything, not to keep harping on this, but you really have to have that positive mindset and just have the determination that you're going to make things good for yourself, no matter what life has thrown at you. But the also stumbling block could be not having a plan. Because if you fail to plan, then you plan to fail. And it's just a super catchy little phrase, but it's just like a builder that's building a house. He's not going to try to build a house without a blueprint. He has to know what are all the factors that I need? What are the supplies, the skills, the talents, the assistance, the accountability that I need? What is my actual goal? What am I visualizing that I want? And then has a plan, a laid out plan for how to build that house. And just like our life, we can't say, oh, one day, let's just use, for example, writing a book. I want to write a book. Okay, that's awesome. That's a great goal. But if that's all you have, then you're probably not going to meet that goal because you need a strategy. You need to say, I'm going to do this by this amount of time. I'm going to write this many chapters or contact this many people. I'm going to do this research. Have steps and deadlines for yourself. And whether it's losing weight or starting a new career or finding a new relationship or just reshaping your life, taking on new hobbies, whatever it is that we want to do in our new season, in our new beginning, it's really important to have a plan. And goal setting is something that became very important to me. And I learned many years ago when I was working in the corporate world, just the value of having that. And we all often tend to think, well, I have this dream. I don't know if it'll happen or how it'll happen. Well, then figure out a way to make it happen. And so I really, in this book, I hope to just kind of put a fire under people and give them that zest for learning and that desire to set a plan for themselves. So you're not stuck and you can accomplish those things that may seem out of reach. It may be a vision of how you want to be or how you want your life to be. But as long as you have a plan and you're working towards it, then every day you're making some progress.
Tracie, speak to that woman who finds herself in a situation like you found yourself in 8-9 years ago, where there's this beginning that's come and there is a marriage that's ending. What are the tactical things you did at the time to keep the mindset, to progress forward, to look out for the stumbling blocks? And what are some things you wished that you would have done when you were trying to put together a plan for moving forward into a future that was not part of your plan when you were looking at having had 25 years of marriage with someone?
Right. Well, unfortunately, I spent the first, 6-9 months, a year, stuck in a really bad place. And I think that's completely natural for anyone that has their life, upset like that and just your heart broken and everything that comes along with that. So if I had to regret something, it would be spending so much time thinking, I cannot embrace this new chapter of life. I cannot be a financially independent single person. And I spent so much time telling myself, you can't do that. You can't do that. And I had kind of been mentally beat down over the years, which I also think happens to a lot of women and men too, for that matter. So that's one reason why that changing your mindset was such a game changer for me, because I could still be stuck in that place. But
right.
There became a time I remember just waking up one day and I went out to I think I might have shared this story at some other point, but I remember walking to my mailbox a year and a half later, and it was a gorgeous day. Everything was beautiful. The flowers smelled beautiful. And I just felt this sense of joy. And it was kind of like God said, see, you can things have changed. Things have been hard, but you can still be happy, and you can still embrace where I have you. And in this new season, I still have good things for you. And so just recognizing the fact that we may not like where we are, we may not be happy that God didn't answer prayers to keep us from hitting a season, or maybe it's just like you were saying, the kids grew up and life moved on. Nothing tragic has happened. It's just you're in a different place and you're not really sure what to do. So just making that decision that, okay, I'm going to make things different now. I'm not just going to stay stuck here and wish in misery that things were different, because all the wishing and crying in the world is not going to change it. But action and having a plan and having a goal and having a vision of how you want to be and you want your life to be will give you that motivation to start taking whatever steps are needed to move forward.
It's probably one of the number one questions I get being a mom of 8 kids. And that question is, what on earth are y'all doing about college? And I can tell you, with 8 different kids, 8 different learning styles, 8 different ideas about what the kids want when it comes to their careers and all of the rest, college has been a big topic of conversation around here. Well, there is a university that I want you to know about because it just hits so many of the things that are really important when it comes to considering your kids' college education. George Fox University, it's the #1 private school in Oregon. It's a Christian university. It's located in the heart of the Pacific Northwest. And what's so great is, in addition to a top-notch education, students have the opportunity to grow and deepen their faith, and they can learn in this really pivotal time in their lives who God made them to be. I mean, let's face it, we need more people coming out of our universities who know how to be leaders and how to be leaders with character. And George Fox University offers more than 60 academic majors. And that includes a nationally recognized engineering program, a nursing program. It allows your student to pursue their passions and prepare for the calling that God has for them. And let's not forget about fun when it comes to college. George Fox University students have a great student life. There are weekly campus events, there's chapel, there's service opportunities. There are 23 NCAA Division III athletic teams. Here's something that is important to me. There's a study abroad opportunity. So if your student wants to go and experience life somewhere else for a semester, they can do that. There's outdoor recreation because, of course, we're talking about Oregon, so gorgeous. George Fox University could be just the perfect fit for your student as you are looking into college, career, and all that goes beyond. George Fox University, where your student will learn and thrive in the center of it all. You write about that we have hit a point where low self-esteem is just at an absolute crisis level. When we look at people reporting about their mental health, how they feel, things that are going on, we see self-esteem be so low. Tracie, within the world of those who share our faith, I hear opinions on all sides. Everything from, well, self-esteem isn't even really a thing. All of our hope should be in Jesus. Why are you even worried about self-confidence or self-esteem? All the way up to almost making the pursuit of self-esteem or self-confidence its own kind of idol, to the detriment of letting God interrupt your life sometimes or bring somebody in your path who needs your help or whatever. How do you align what we see is the world understanding is a real problem when it comes to self-esteem with our faith, with what it means to maintain and increase our self-confidence, and yet at the same time remain reliant and dependent on God? That whole alchemy, like how do you get that whole formula to work in a way that carries you forward into new seasons in a way that's healthy?
Yeah. Well, I'm certainly not a psychological expert or anything and that might have a specific formula, but as for me and just in my experience, when my marriage ended, and even years before that, in a job that I had that was I had a very critical supervisor. And then I had other people in my life that would speak things into me that, would destroy your self-esteem. And then by the time the whole marriage situation kind of blew up, probably had the lowest self-confidence and self-esteem that I'd ever had. So that was almost like the final blow. But what I realized was you really have to focus on who you are in God's eyes. And that was part of retraining my thoughts. So if I would think a negative thought about myself or something that, oh, you can't do that, then I would always go back to the three steps. I would, number one, recognize I thought that. Okay, there's another negative thought running through your head, and that's what's controlling your life. Number two, reject it. Make sure that I don't consistently think that thought anymore, and then rephrase it. So you can rephrase it to say, okay, this might have happened, but this good can come out of it. Or, yes, I might have this imperfection, but out of it, I'm going to grow, and I'm going to try to think differently or be differently or learn a certain skill or whatever it is that you seem to be down on. I can't think of a perfect example to share right now, but it's also recognizing that. And one thing I talk about in the book is that we talk about confidence, we talk about courage, and the definition of confidence is believing in yourself, believing in your own inner gifts, your abilities, your talents, who you are in God's eyes. And then courage is just the quality of mind and spirit that gives us the bravery to move forward. So a lot of times we think, well, I have to be confident before I can be courageous enough to take this step. But it kind of needs to come a little bit backwards. We have to be courageous and know that God has called us to something or that he has a plan for us and be willing to leap, even if it's in blind faith. Just be willing to take those first steps. And once we start doing that, and this is especially after my marriage ended, once I realized, oh, okay, I can work again. I can make an employment. I can still be a good mom. I can still fix these financial difficulties and dig myself out of this hole. And I can accomplish writing these books that I thought I couldn't write in the aftermath of that. That builds your confidence. So sometimes it takes courage and bravery that we can pray for God to help us have. And over time, that also builds our confidence. So both of those really go hand in hand.
I like how you invert those for us because you're right. So often we think we have to conjure up the confidence in order to be courageous instead of realizing that courage breeds confidence and more courage breeds more confidence. And the beauty is God's got us when we do courageous things. I think so often about how many people in scripture would have never made a move if they were relying on their confidence. It just wouldn't have happened from Gideon to Moses to on and on and on. And yet, because they were willing to step into courage, the gift of that became confidence. That's a really great way of looking at that. You talk about making SMART goals in the book. So I know it's got to be an acronym for something that looks really cool. So I want to hear, in a season of new beginnings, in beginning again, how do we set SMART goals? What does that mean?
Well, this is a term, and I can't remember the year, but I have all the stats about it and where it came from, the people that developed this term in the book. So you can get a really great understanding of how this term came about and why it's so important and beneficial for us in every aspect of our life. But the term SMART means, and as you said, it is an acronym for things, but to set a goal, like I said earlier, if your goal is to lose weight, okay, that's a great goal. But if you want to be strategic about it, your goal needs to be specific, which is what the S is. It needs to be measurable, so you have a tangible way to track your progress. That's the M. The A is action-oriented. What steps are you going to take to make that happen? The R is be realistic. And the T is be time-bound. So have some kind of timeline that you want to follow. So whether it's to lose 5 pounds, 100 pounds, whether it's to get a new job or master a new skill, if we be strategic in the goal, that's what we're going to be able to hold ourselves accountable, because we're going to say, I want to do this. I want to do it in this way. These are the steps I'm going to take. It is realistic because it's something that I, physically have the capacity to do, and I'm going to do it by X amount of time. So that's what sets you up for success in being able to meet your goals, because it doesn't seem as lofty or beyond our ability, because we're taking small steps to get to where we want to be, and we can track our progress along the way.
In the face of new beginnings, do you find, or in the women that you talk to and looking at your own life, Is part of our overwhelm that we aren't getting specific? There's so much coming at us, or it may feel like there's just a complete vacuum. Say, for example, when kids leave and they leave the nest and we don't know what to do with ourselves because there just seems to be silence. Or in those times where there's a new season that's beginning, it's not one we wanted, and there are so many details flying at us, like you said at the end of your marriage, from financial to kids to all the things. Do you find that's part of the problem that leaves us a little bit paralyzed, is we just don't even know quite where to start, that getting specific is actually a really big problem, a big challenge?
It can be a big challenge. And like I was saying, if, like, not to keep going back to the divorce example, but it is a good example. But, when that happened and when I was in that season of just such confusion and heartache and not knowing what the future held and just all the fears that were coming along with that, it was hard for me to think, okay, well, a year from now, I'm going to be amazing. Things are going to be great. I'm going to have this success. It's hard to visualize that. But if I said, okay, this month, this is a SMART goal I want to set for myself. And then I can do that thing, or, I probably had several goals at the time, and just take those small steps. And every small step is a step in the right direction to get us to where we want to be. But if we think about just the whole overarching thing that we want to accomplish, whatever that thing is, that can become a stumbling block in itself because we think it's too big. That's never going to happen. But if we break it down into smaller goals, then that's how we'll begin making progress towards getting to where we want to be. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
And describe that?
Yeah. And I find too, for myself, for people that I've talked with, sometimes an easy place, I say easy, but something wise to do when it comes to a big transition, when it comes to looking at what some of those first SMART goals are going to be that you put into place, it can be things like, I'm going to go to bed by this time, or I'm going to make sure I'm drinking enough water, or I'm going to walk the block. For 1 month, I'm going to focus on each day walking the block. And it's something specific. It's something that is very measurable, all those things to make sure that we're doing what we can to take care of ourselves physically in the midst of a lot of emotional challenge. Mm-hmm. Those small things like that can end up having huge dividends. It makes me think about the way God has put his kingdom together, where a small mustard seed of something, of saying, God, I know that you've got a better future for me. I'm at least going to be hydrated for it. can be its own act of worship, I think, to be willing to instill that as someone moves forward through a season of big change.
Yeah.
How do you capture those negative thoughts that you've talked about? Because they do seem to come for us, whether it's in the form of regret, whether it's in the form of overwhelm. You talked about saying, okay, oh, there it is, a negative thought. I see it. I know what it is. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I think negative thoughts can sort of slip through the filter a little bit because we think we're just being realistic. Mm-hmm. So how do we recognize negative thoughts? But at the same time, we talk about toxic positivity, meaning people who are like, there are no weeds in my garden. There are no weeds in my garden. And there are weeds in the garden. They're choking out good stuff. So how do we balance capturing negative thoughts, not allowing them to influence everything, while at the same time remaining at a level of integrity and honesty with ourselves when there are things that are going to have to be dealt with? We can't just positive think them away. How does that align in your mind and in your walk with God?
Yeah. Well, we definitely can't just live with rose-colored glasses because, like you said, there are things that you have to deal with. But it really does boil down to your faith, and there are things that are just out of our control. And that's what I was saying from the very beginning. If there was things that I could not change, okay, I can't change them, but what can I do? What can I do to make changes in other areas to make, positive progress? And I really get hung up on the 2 Corinthians 10:5 verse where it talks about demolishing arguments and, anything that sets itself up against the knowledge of God, and taking every thought captive and making it obedient to Christ. And when I used to not really understand that, I'm like, okay, how can I control what I'm thinking, and why is that going to matter? But in that book I mentioned earlier, I did so much research on, and this sounds really interesting, but on brains and brain function and MRIs and things of that nature. And I realized how much science actually lines up with the Bible, because the Bible says, take your thoughts captive. And that, that's what's going to propel us in a different direction. And that's why it's so important, not that we can live with rose-colored glasses, but to recognize, how is thinking that negatively affecting me? Because how we think drives our emotions, and our emotions are going to drive our actions, and our actions are determine how we live our life. Right. So just being aware. So we can't all be just perpetual optimists and never feel sad and never feel upset and never have a negative thought. But trying to reel that in can really change your life and send it in a different direction. So I know people that are perpetual pessimists, and I know some that are perpetual optimists, and you're just going to live a happier life if you have a happier mind. So, there are things that are out of our control and things that aren't going to be great that we have to deal with, and problems and challenges. But even in those times, we can still be positive about God is still here. He sees, he knows what's going on. He's got it under control, even though you don't, and just do the best that we can.
Right, right. It makes me think about that. That's really, to me, where true authenticity lives, true transparency lives, which is acknowledging there are tough things and saying, but I am someone who has faith in God, faith that he's carrying me. I can't exactly visualize the outcome at this point, but I can live in this tension of things being tough and also having a high expectation for what God's going to do. I can live there. I don't have to deny what's been happening. I don't have to pretend like I'm not having some of these feelings, but they don't have to be the governor of what happens next. I think that's a really great way to look at that. Well, Tracie, I'm so excited for the listener to be able to get hold of your new book, God's Got You, New Beginnings, Embracing New Beginnings with Courage and Confidence. Where can the listener go to find out more about you, your work, the book, all the things?
Yeah. Well, you can go to traciemiles.com, as I mentioned earlier, and you can see all of my books on the books tab on my website. And it's available at the Proverbs31 Ministries bookstore, Amazon, anywhere that books are sold.
Okay, awesome.
And
all right, listener.
Get free gifts. If you buy the book before release, I have a Step Into Your New Beginnings workbook, which is an ebook that goes along with the book. And it's just a great journaling, really thing to help people propel forward in what they want to do and just kind of journal their thoughts. And then some prayer cards and some screensavers. So those are fun.
Gotta love those pre-release. Go ahead and go get the goods so you can also get all the freebies. I love that, Tracie. Thanks for making those resources available. Well, as always, we've had you on before. We'll have Rebecca link that previous interview in the show notes. So listener, you can go back and also hear all of the great things that Tracie has to say, just helping us understand, lean into, rely on God throughout all the seasons. Tracie, again, thanks so much for your time being here today.
All right. Thank you, Julie.
And friend, again, go check out those show notes. Rebecca has all the good stuff there, all the links, everything you can need. Also, make sure you're part of the AllMomDoes community. You can do that by going to the socials, by going to the blog, to the website. You're going to find an amazing group of women there who are walking through all kinds of things in life, there to encourage each other, share the things they've learned, share their hearts, pray for each other. You can find that at allmomdoes.com and on the socials. I love to connect with you too. Julie Lyles Carr, mainly on Instagram. Come see me over there. As always, we want to hear your comments, your questions, your ideas for upcoming guests and upcoming show topics. We love getting that from you. So be sure and do that for us. And I'll see you next time on the AllMomDoes podcast.